RD125 conversion into a YSR 50 chassis. In front is original chassis and motor, uncut, unchanged. In back, the mounted, running, working RD125. Some of the things that has to be done is obviously this lower cradle is removed. Once that's removed, you have to remove these mounting tangs on both sides to make room for the RD. Left side pretty much gets untouched except for the mounting tang for the lower cradle. Right side, you have to remove the mounting tang, and then this boss has to get cut back to make room for the RD engine. You have to bring it back a good little bit, but it fits right in. The upper rear mount has to be reinforced. It's exactly a ½ inch wider than the RD boss, and this upper motor mount is what holds the little swivel pivot mount on the YSR. But basically, if you just add a 1/4 inch to this side and a 1/4 inch to this side, you can extend your mount to receive the upper rear engine mount of the RD. The lower engine mount conveniently is exactly in this position, so you can use some of this structure to bolt your lower rear motor mount on the RD125. What I did is I loosely placed and positioned the lower mount with bolt through the engine, aligned it to the swing arm where it needed to be, and then I adjusted my position to try and make the motor sit as flat as I could. By rights, I probably could have had the motor sit back another 1/4 inch and it would have sat perfectly flat, as it does in the original bike. But it's close enough, it works. And the front motor mounts on the RD are somewhat original per se. I added this chromoly tube to the YSR chassis, ground down the bolt bosses. See, they're a little loose there, but ground down the bolt bosses from the original. These are set up to receive a flat surface, so ground them so that it was a nice tight fit, slip fit, rounded, and used the original bosses. Once it's bolted up nice and tight, it's as good as the original frame. And that size tube is exactly the width of the engine bosses, so these plates work perfectly. As for the pipes, used the stock RD headers, and after running the port map and port timing through a bunch of modeling programs, I used 3 different programs and kind of came up with what I thought would be the best blend of all 3 programs. But basically I had to cut the stock headers about 2 inches shorter and weld my cones and everything else onto the stock headers. Mount tang underneath the foot peg on the lower bolt. You got one little tang inside on the engine bolt, which goes through to the left side frame. And I added a piece of 1/2-inch tube through the original holes and slipped my 2 1/8-inch plates on each side and welded everything together to really strengthen it up. Pretty good compared to the original mounts. The original mounts are pretty flimsy. The RD engine itself, the original engine on the left side cover has a big flange that comes out down to about here. There's a big steel boss that comes out, and that's what your left foot peg mounts to on the original bike. So to do this, you have to sacrifice left side engine cover. If you have 2 engine covers, you can obviously cut up one and save the other one for your RD 125 if you're pulling the motor out of a working bike and trying to swap motors and have fun with it. Left side pipe, same idea. Mounting tang off the side of the pipe underneath the lower bolt on the stock foot peg. Just enough clearance underneath the swing arm and chain, so we're all good there. Silencers I got are EPA approved 2-stroke silencers, cheap enough, off of JC Whitney. Surprisingly, they have 2 sizes. I got the bigger ones, a little bit louder and probably a little bit more free exhaust. The shifter, basically just cut the shifter down to make it a good length for the YSR setup. Interesting, because of the RD original bike, the way they had it set up with the boss here and the foot peg, it had a shifting lever mechanism that had a pivot point, so it kind of came back down and around. So when you press down, it shift down, and when you lift up, it would shift up like a normal bike does. But by eliminating that linkage, it actually reverses the shift pattern, so now it's 1 up and 4 down, backwards from most bikes. Some people call that a GP race transmission, being your foot would be on top of the shifter in left-hand turns while you're accelerating out. That's the idea behind that, but works out real well on this small bike. And the only thing that did not swap pretty easily was engine kill switch on your foot peg. But age of the bike, you might be able to get it by registration, you might not, but easy enough to add if you're still trying to register it. And by rights, being it's a 125, you're not changing the class of motorcycle at all. It still falls under the class of motor driven cycle, and that goes up to 150 cc's in most states. You retain all your lighting, all your turn signals, all your kill switches except for the side stand switch, and you're probably quadrupling the horsepower. The original bike is also oil injected, so I could use the stock oil tank and just hooked it up to the RD 125. I'm running oil injection and just tuning for gas, rich or lean. Couple little things I did as well for mounting. I had to weld 2 brackets on each side to hold the coils on each side, but there's plenty of room in there